Well, happy summer, everyone. It's June 22nd, and welcome to Supercharge Your Impact. It's our webinar about the PB&J, the peanut butter and jelly, the transformation of and synergy of DISC and WHYos. I want to thank, first of all, I want to thank, you see Mark Walker on the screen here. Mark is my successor. So many of you know me from Success Performance Solutions days. Last summer, if you aren't aware, I actually sold my company to Dame Leadership. And I've known Mark for a few years, and they brought him in, and Mark is our successor. So he's going to give a real short intro to Dame Leadership and where we are, and then we're going to welcome our guests, Gary Sanchez and Dan Dominguez from the Y Institute. This is going to be a great program. I've done, for those of you who know me for a number of years, I've been using personally. I've used DISC for 40 years, maybe more. But like many of you, you probably stuck it in your drawer once you're done. And then 25 or 28 years ago, I started the business, and it formed around DISC. But I quickly realized that there were many other parts to DISC that it didn't tell the whole story. It resonated with me a little bit, but it wasn't a whole picture. So for those who have known me over the last 25, 26 years, you always knew that I used a second assessment, and it started with one called Business Motivators, and then we used the Quality of Motivation, and then Preview and Harvard. Still recommend all of those, still use those. But we're complicated human beings, and was trying to put this entire picture together. But I haven't been this excited about a tool that helped us understand, especially in these extraordinary, never normal times, like the WHYos. It's been a great discovery. And for those that have followed me for the last year or so know that I'm all in on this. And so honored and privileged to get to know Gary and Dan and that organization. But the combination, the synergy between DISC that many of you are familiar with, and some of the other tools that you use, and the WHYos is just incredibly powerful. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So thank you. We had a huge number of people sign up. Hope everybody can get online. If you have to drop off for some reason, there will be a replay. Hope you'll share this once we're done. And also, if you have some comments, please put them in there's a comment box in the upper right, so you can share your comments. We'll put a few links in there that you can access as well. Let us know what you're calling in from, and if you have any questions, we'll try to address those too, because this is part presentation, part Q&A. But before we go further, and before I talk through the whole program, I'm going to introduce Mark again. And Mark, tell us a little bit about Dame Leadership and where Success Performance Solutions fits in.
Oh, nice. Well, I appreciate the introduction, Ira. It's an honor for me to be on one of these sessions with you. I've been watching you for years, and it's great to be part of one finally. And on behalf of Dame Leadership, we're actually proud to be sponsoring today's session. And I know we're all really excited to learn about this, so I promise to keep this short. To give you a little bit of background on Dame Leadership for our listeners, we are a consulting firm that teams up with leaders to help bring focus to their purpose, align their organizations, achieve extraordinary results, and actually create a lasting legacy. We believe that a better leader is one who is more effective at leading and achieving desired outcomes, which is why we're actually participating in this session today. We know that a more purposeful leader is one who has a clear sense of their values and goals, and who's able to align those actions with those values and goals. And Ira, you talk about this almost on a weekly basis on how to do that and what tools are out there for leaders to do that. But how do we do this, and how do we help our clients today? Well, we actually bring several solutions such as strategic planning, leadership academies, board advisory services, just to name a few. But I do need to mention, to your point about Success Performance Solutions, that we actually bring an entire library of assessment solutions to our clients so they can provide growth, coaching, and development to their team members from the point of hire all the way through promotion and all the way through executive leadership. So we want to be there for our clients from the point that they actually do get hired and help them to grow and become an integral part of that company. All of our services can be found on our website at dameleadership.com, and everyone can connect with us on LinkedIn. So as our team always says, we look for things to help you become a better and more purposeful leader. And I personally know that today's session is one of those things. So thank you for letting us participate. And at this point, Ira, I'm going to hand the session back over to you. I think you're on mute, Ira.
So thanks, everyone. And thank you, Mark, and thank you, Dame Leadership. Thanks to John and Ed and the whole team over there for being involved. And interesting enough, where this fits in really well with Dame is if you go to the website, it starts out lead with purpose. Mm-hmm. And this is just a great way to help define that. But we're here today to talk about DISC and why, and other tools as well, but especially DISC and why. So we're gonna make a transition here. Mark, I'm gonna put you back in the green room.
Sounds great.
And I'm gonna bring Dan, my buddy Dan, and Gary to the front stage. So welcome, guys.
Hello, Ira. Well, this is such a treat. Thank you for having us. You know, you guys have been watching. Ira's been very good about posting, and we've been reposting about the classic pairing of bread, butter, salt and pepper, coffee and cream. And that's really what our two guests are today. An amazing pairing that's going to bring you some real value. So we're so glad you're here. You know, I'll introduce Ira first. And you guys that are here, many of you already know him. He's obsessed with helping others find a better way to be extraordinary. He's terrified and fascinated by VUCA level change. He is definitely a millennial in a baby boomer body. He's a Hall of Fame speaker, a future of work global thought leader. And more importantly, for our purposes today, he's a DISC whiz. So welcome, Ira. We're so glad to have you here.
Hey, thanks.
And secondly, we want to introduce Gary. Gary Sanchez is an international speaker, an author, a dentist, and an inventor. And he's best known for discovering the 9 whys, developing the why operating system. He's the founder of the Why Institute, and he's created the world's first why discovery tool that allows people to discover their why in under 5 minutes. And if you're having a hard time believing that, I know this is going to come as a great surprise to you, and we're excited to share it with you. He's obsessed with helping hundreds of thousands of people discover their why. And he's created a software to help 1 billion people discover their why. So between these two brilliant minds, I think we're going to have a great session today. So I'll turn it back over to you, Ira.
Hey, thanks so much, Dan. And just you mentioned that Gary was a dentist. I don't know. I guess you and I are still trying to figure out, are we still dentists or were we dentists? But we came from that past, but had no connection prior to meeting here. So here's the good news is many of you have probably heard that, you know, the dentist had the highest suicide rate. Well, apparently we no longer have that. We just changed careers in midlife. So and go on to pursue our passion, which is what today is about. You know, with so much conversation going on about meaningful work, meaningful life, finding purpose, purpose-driven leadership. We hear this all the time, but having a tool to be able to do that is just extraordinary. So, Gary, I know you're going to share your story in just a minute and go on and how you got to this point. But thank you, for doing that. And it's just incredible because I guess fascinated me about this, what got me involved with why, where I saw this connection, is that despite 50 years of self-development. I think I took my first MBTI in dental school. That was the 1 hour of business management we had. And we took an MBTI to see who we were and if we were extroverted or introverted. And we put it in the drawer and we sort of knew what it was, and then went to a couple business management courses or self-help courses. And we'd always take a tool and learn what it was, and then we'd say, yeah, that was interesting. Then we put it in the drawer. But I started to make some connections about 28 years ago, and they were powerful. But the one thing that I was never ever able to do was answer the question: is what's your purpose? What do you want out of life? At the end of the day, what do you want on your tombstone, or what do you want people to remember you by? And it's like, I wanted to be a good dentist. I wanted to be a good father. I wanted to be a good parent. I wanted to be a good spouse. I wanted to be a good son. There were all these identity things, but they all sound good and go, oh yeah, that's a great tool. I want to make sure my family has a good living. And it was. That's what I wanted to do. But those were things I had to do. Those were things that were my responsibility. But it didn't give me the energy to do it. And I knew there was something else. I just couldn't articulate it. I couldn't define it. So after working on this for close to 40 years or maybe even 50 years, when I met Dan, and then Gary last year, and within 8 to 10 minutes, it was like, yeah, this is it. This is what I've been trying to say for 50 years. So here we are. But I'm here to talk about DISC and what the role is. And again, this isn't a certification or a training program on DISC, but I want to do the basics of it, of how this works. And while DISC is incredibly powerful, it doesn't do a lot of the things that people think it does. So number one, it's a horrible, horrible predictor of whether you're going to be successful in life. It doesn't predict what job you're going to be good at. Just because you're a D doesn't mean you're a good leader. Because an I doesn't mean you're a good salesperson. It just says 4 things. We call them the 4 Ps. And before I even get to the 4 Ps, let me backtrack that back a second. How do we get these 4 Ps? Well, DISC, everybody thinks that there's 4 scales that it measures. There's actually only 2, because you've seen the box, and the 4 scales, or the 2 scales, are, one is, if you're sitting there, you can draw this. I don't have a whiteboard here, but you can draw it on a piece of paper, a vertical line. And at the top of that line, write task. And at the bottom of the line, write people. Because one of the scales says, are you more task-oriented or are you more people-oriented? Mm-hmm. Do you get energized by doing the work or interacting with the people? It's as simple as that. The horizontal line, going from left to right, would be, on the left side, you would be indirect or somewhat guarded. And on the right side, you would be direct or telling. You tell people what to do. It's the reverse. On the left side is the tell. On the right side is the indirect. And you ask. So on the left side, you basically are saying, you basically tell people what's on your mind. You're pretty direct. You tell people what to do. On the right side, you ask people. You beat around the bush. You're a little bit indirect on doing that. What that did was create 4 grids. And most people label those DISC. So in the upper left corner, you have D. On the upper right corner, you have I. In the lower right, you have S. On the lower left, you have C. Now, behind each of those, there's an energy. And this is all it does. It doesn't say that if you're a D, you're good at doing this. It says, if I'm a D, I'm energized by solving problems. And remember the P, it's problems. If we hop over to the I, it says I'm energized by influencing, which is the I, or interacting with other people. I love being out there. It was very tough during the pandemic for people to be energized, being home and lonely. Introverts loved it, because on the lower side of that, they're de-energized. Low I's are de-energized by too much influencing and too much interaction. It's all it is. It's an energy tool. It's like our gas tank. So high D's are either energized or de-energized by solving problems. I's are energized or de-energized by interacting and influence people. If we go down to the lower right side, we got the S, which is steadiness. So we're either energized by a steady pace or de-energized by a steady pace, which is having a sense of urgency, being impatient. And then if we go to the final one, the C, the P that would be involved is procedures. Are we energized by complying with rules set by other people? Or are we de-energized by complying with the rules set by other people? So the 4 Ps are problems, people, pace, and procedure. That's all DISC does. It says, are we energized by problems, people, pace, and procedure? Now, associated with that is our body language. As you can see, if you haven't been able to tell, for those who are familiar with D, you can watch me. My actions are succinct and abrupt and pointing. My tone is, there's a certain tone I have for DISC. for each of the styles, and the words I use. So basically, it's a great tool to help understand how people communicate. So think of it this way. Instead of looking at the DIS or C and people can't remember what they are or don't remember what it means, or the 4 Ps, think about if the 4 quadrants, these 4 behavioral styles represented a different language. One was English, one was Spanish, one was French, one was Russian or Chinese. And all of a sudden, and I'm not fluent in any of those, but let's say that I was fluent in Chinese. And all of a sudden, I started to speak only in Chinese. Well, there might be a few of you who could pick up a few words. So maybe there's even somebody who's fluent in this language. But all of a sudden, you wouldn't understand the word I'm saying. You can watch my mannerisms, and you may like me or dislike me from those mannerisms, but you really wouldn't be able to understand what my message was. And eventually, you would just tune me off, turn me out, and that's what happens with our behavioral language. Our behavioral language is how do we get people's attention? What resonates not only with you, what gives you energy, but what allows you to emanate that to other people. And the good news about this is that it's called the universal language because it's observable as well, is that you can observe people and pretty much pick up whether they're a D, IS, or C. And now you're able to speak with them on that plane. For instance, there are some people. I'm a pretty fast talker, and I'm a loud talker, and I'm somewhat animated. Not animated as these 2 guys, but I'm somewhat because they're I's. I'm D. We share that in common. But I'm a low I, so I don't have that same level of animation and maybe that same level of optimism that comes out. However, if I also started to talk in a monotone voice and a low voice and said, I'm really excited about the WHYos and DISC. Okay. Now, every word I said could be true, and it could be intelligent, and I can have all the expertise in the world, but there's some people that would be absolutely turned off by them.
Yeah.
But in the same way, there's people that are turned off by my animation and my abruptness and my directness. So we need to learn how to adapt and speak 4 languages, D, IS, and C. So it doesn't matter if you're a D, IS, or a C. It matters what the other people are who you're trying to communicate that message with. And then you adapt, and we become chameleons, and we understand how to become fluent in DISC. So DISC is really no more than it's a great tool to understand how other people prefer to communicate, how they prefer to solve problems, interact with people, what pace they prefer to work on, and how they prefer to comply with rules. That's it. It doesn't tell us if we're good at it, bad at it, smart at it, dumb at it. And it does nothing to say why we want to do what we want to do with our lives. DISC is purely about how, and I know there's a little overlap with that with our WHYos, which Gary will get into, but it purely means how we prefer to communicate that message. So when we get into this is that you can have a WHYos, an operating system, and I'll share mine right now and show you how I apply DISC, and then I'm going to turn it over to Gary, and Gary's going to say, here's how we got there. Here's the meaning behind it. So my why, what I learned, my WHYos is to help others find a better way. That's my how. And my what is to challenge the status quo. Now, for those of you who've known me for years, you may have been able to tell me that without me doing 50 years of research and working on it. But it didn't come out clearly. But those were the words that came out of the Discover Your Why. What I had to do was put those into my words to articulate that in a way that resonated with me. And where I found the WHYos had this synergy, not only did it help me identify that, but it helped me articulate what it was. So now when I share what my WHYos is, I can either read it out of the book, or it's to help ordinary people find a better way to be extraordinary in challenging times. We are living in challenging times. This couldn't come out at a better time for me. It was how to articulate what I'm going to do. And a lot of people identify me as a futurist. I love the future at work. I'm a podcaster. I'm an author. I do all those things. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's how to help ordinary people live and thrive and grow in extraordinary times. That's it. And that resonates with people, that articulates with people, and it rolls off my tongue. I don't have to say, oh, let me pull it out of the drawer. What was my YOS again? What was my DISC? What was my business motivators? What did my personality test say? This is us. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Gary, because Gary's got a great story, other than sharing it coming from dentistry, of how we got to this place. Gary, it's all yours.
All right. Well, thank you, Ira. That was super helpful for me, by the way, because to be honest, I don't know a ton about DISC. I don't know a ton about most of the other assessments. And I kind of did that on purpose so that I never get confused, or somebody says, hey, you took this from here, because I really don't know a lot about them, but that was very helpful. And so are you able to see my screen? Is everybody able to see my screen? Or you got to bring that in, don't you? There we go. Okay. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to spend maybe 10, 15 minutes and take those of you that already know a lot about YOS. We're going to go even deeper and share some things with you that maybe you haven't seen before. And those of you that don't know anything about YOS, we're going to bring you up to speed so that you learn a little bit more about it. All right. So in the past, this whole concept of why has been so incredibly frustrating, right? We all heard about it. We all saw the TED Talk. We read the books, and it was, how the heck do I possibly find it? It's this elusive thing called why. And so let me ask you some questions. Think about this for a minute. In your own life, why do you do what you do? Think about that for a minute. Why do you do what you do? And sometimes, even more importantly, why don't others just do things the way you think they should be done? Right? Why do they do them their own way? Why do you have energy for some things and other things you don't have any energy for? Why are you passionate about some things and others you're not passionate about? Why do you walk into a room and you quickly connect with some people and other people you don't connect with at all? Why do you make the decisions that you make? And why should I choose you over everybody else who does what I do? And those are some pretty challenging questions, right? But once you know your YOS, those become so much easier. Here's what we're going to talk about. I want to first talk about why the why. Why do you need to know your why? Why is this important to you? And then, is there actually something better than why? Something more powerful than why? And if there is, what is it and how do I use it? All right. Why do I need to know my why? Simon Sinek says you need to start everything with why, right? If you know your why, what you do will have more impact. Tony Robbins says, when you know your why, you'll know how to live. So it gives you the way to live your life. Michael Hyatt says, when you know your why, you'll know your way. So it gives you the path for your life. Friedrich Nietzsche says, he who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow. So it gives you the grit to hang in there when times are tough. And Mark Twain says that the two most important days in your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. So it's one of the two most important days in your life is discovering your why, as it was with Ira, right? He spent 40 years trying to figure this out. And then in 8 minutes had an answer. That was my story as well. In 1988, I graduated from USC Dental School. That's me there on the right. It's funny because I have a speaker coach that helps me, and he calls me in a panic one day and he says, hey, Gary, my right or your right? And I said, no, your right. And he says, it can't be my right because that's a girl. And I said, no, it's not a girl. That's me. And I never thought about that before. Now I can't stop thinking about that. But the advice that I was given in 1988 was that if you build a great product, people will come. That's what they told me. Build a great product, people will come. Go out and do the best job you can, and people will naturally and mysteriously find out about you. So those of you that are listening, I imagine you've heard that same thing. As a coach, go do the best job you can, and people will just flock to you. And I can tell you it didn't work that way for me. And I spent 20 years getting to the highest levels I could, studying with the best mentors, building a beautiful facility, hiring a great team, and buying all the technology. And 20 years later, I ended up right here, feeling like the best kept secret in Albuquerque because I still blended in with everybody else who said, yeah, I'm a dentist too. And I was ready to quit. And that's when I went out and hired a coach. And through that coach, I learned about Simon Sinek. And I saw his TED Talk, and I watched it 30 times, and I read his book 4 or 5 times. And I said, that's what I'm missing. I have a great what, but I don't know my why. So I called Simon and I said, Simon, I need you to help me discover my why. So he and I spent about 8 months together. This was back in 2009, actually, going back through my life looking for clues. He didn't really have a process for doing it, but we kept working and working. And I finally discovered my why, which is to find a better way and then share it, to find a better way and share it. Everything in my life is about finding better ways to do things and then sharing them with the world. I have a lot of patents and products and inventions that are better ways of doing things. And I took what I learned from Simon, stopped talking about what we do in my dental practice and started talking about why we did it. And that's when my practice took off. We went from just getting by to having abundance. And as my practice took off, I started getting calls from other dentists that wanted me to help them do what I was doing. And I started helping anybody that would let me discover their why. And since my why is to find a better way and share it, I went back and figured out what Simon was trying to do, and I made it better. So instead of taking 6 or 8 or 10 months, I could sit down with you in about an hour, help you discover your why, and then build your messaging, marketing, branding, all based on your why. And I did this for so many thousands of people for free that I started to notice patterns and trends and similarities. And I figured out that there's only 9 different whys. And these are the whys here. So you're welcome to take a screenshot of it. If you don't have it, we don't have a lot of time right now to dive deep into them, but I'll go through them real quickly with you. The first why is contribute. To contribute to a greater cause, make a difference, add value, or have an impact in people's lives. These are people that want to help. They don't need to be the focus, but they want to contribute in a meaningful way. The second why is trust. To create relationships based upon trust, to be the trusted source, to be the one that others can count on. If you can trust them and they can trust you, the sky's the limit. But if you break their trust, you probably won't get it back. The third why is make sense. To make sense out of things, especially if complex and complicated. These are people that are great problem solvers. You can pretty much dump all your stuff onto them and they'll quickly synthesize it down to that thing that's keeping you stuck and help you move forward by helping you solve your problems. The fourth why is my why, which is better way, to find a better way and share it. These are people that are always looking to improve things, taking things that already exist and making them better. The fifth why is right way. To do things the right way in order to get predictable and consistent results. These are structure, process, systems people. They find things that work and they stick to them. The sixth why is challenge, to think differently and challenge the status quo. These are people that think outside the box. They don't follow the rules. They don't draw inside the lines. They imagine extraordinary and they do things their own way. The seventh why is mastery. To seek mastery and understanding. These are people that like depth and breadth and detail. They take the simple and make it complex by diving in very deep. The eighth why is clarify, to make crystal clear and understandable. These are people that want to fully understand and fully be heard. They're the ones that ask lots of questions before they can move forward. And the ninth why is simplify. To decrease complexity and make things simple, easier to understand. They want things direct, to the point. Don't give me the fluff. Don't beat around the bush. Just hit me with it. So they usually have a very small wardrobe because why would you want to overcomplicate things? So that was a real quick run through of the 9 whys. And every one of you has all of them. but one of them is more dominant than the rest. And that's the one that becomes your why. And so there are a lot of great assessments out there, right? 16 personalities, Myers-Briggs, Strength Finders, Colby, DISC. Those are how you take action, not why you take action. When you start with your why, the rest become more valuable. Why is not more valuable than they are, but starting with your why and your WHYos makes it more powerful, makes the others more powerful. So sequence becomes very important. But I believe that when you know your why, you're actually only 1/3 of the way there, right? You're only 1/3 of the way there. Exactly. How could that be? So where is the other 2/3? You see, when you know your why, you get to see yourself in one dimension. You go from unaware to aware, from not knowing to knowing. But when you add your how, then it starts to take shape. Then it gets better. But when you know your why, your how, and your what, we call that your WHYos. That's when things come into focus. That's when it becomes clear. And that's when you're able to move forward faster and have a bigger impact. So what is WHYos? WHYos is why you do what you do. It's your motivation. It's how you bring your why to life. It's your process. And it's ultimately what you bring. It's the deliverable, right? And so sequence is very important there. If you're building that barbecue or baking that cake, doing things in the right order is very important. The same thing with your why. So let's talk for a minute about brain biology, and we'll talk about two parts of the brain, the outer part of the brain and the inner part of the brain, the limbic brain. So the neocortex and the limbic brain. The neocortex is responsible for rational and analytical thought and language. What that means is it can understand lots of data. Facts, figures, and features are all understood at the level of the neocortex, but no decision-making happens there. So you could tell somebody all the facts, figures, and features of your product, service, or your cause, and they'll say, yeah, I understand what you're saying, but let me think about it. When you connect with somebody at the level of the limbic brain, that's the part of the brain that's responsible for feelings like loyalty and trust. 100% of decision-making happens there, but it doesn't have the capacity for language. So when you want someone to buy your product, your service, or join your cause, you need to first connect to them at the level of the limbic brain, and then they'll justify it with the neocortex. How you do that is by starting with your why, then your how, then your what. So the sequence is why, how, and what. Not what, how, and why, but why, how, what. So let me give you an example. We all know this handsome gentleman right here. So who is Ira Wolf? If you just look at that picture of him, or you look at him on the screen with his headphones and his red jacket, what happens is we all create a narrative around what we think we see. We look at their hairstyle. We look if they have jewelry. We look at their posture. We look at what they're wearing. We look at the things they say, and we create a narrative around who they are. So if you look at that picture of Ira, you could say things like he looks nice, he looks amiable, he looks welcoming, he looks like he wants to have a conversation with you, he looks like he wants to help you. And those could all be correct. But when I tell you that his why is to contribute to a greater cause, have an impact in the lives of others, how he does that is by finding a better way. And ultimately, what he brings are outside the box solutions. Well, now you know a lot more about Ira. You know he wants to help. You know he wants to have an impact. You know he's constantly looking for better ways. And what he's going to bring is something that's different, unique, outside the box. That's how he thinks. And so that's strips away what you think you're looking at in Ira and brings forward what is actually there. And so that's when knowing your WHYos helps you understand a person at a deeper level. This also helps us to understand the language that Ira speaks. If you had an idea that you wanted to present to Ira, you better show him how it's going to contribute, have an impact. You better show him how it's better than what he's currently doing, and you better show him how it's different and outside the box and will have a bigger impact for people, or he's not going to like it. In fact, he won't even think you understand him if you don't. So it also gives you the language in order to help Ira make a decision, in order to help Ira move forward. We can figure this all out now in about 8 minutes. The WHYos discovery, which many of you've used, takes about 8 minutes to do. And then you have so much information on that person. You know, I believe that if Mark Twain was here today, he would say that the two most important days in your life are the day you were born and the day you find your WHYos. Because it's that much more powerful than just knowing your why. So Ira, I want to bring you back in. And I mean, that was a very quick bringing everybody up to speed on WHYos. Your why, your how, and your what. But let's jump into some practical things. Let's talk about this. And if we look at Dan's DISC and my DISC, they're the same. And we're both ID. And I saw when I was looking at the comments that we have a lot of IDs in here as well. Mm-hmm. So based on that, what does that tell you about Dan and myself?
Yeah, great point. And I want to also go back to my WHYos as well, because what we're going to get into is where sometimes, and from my experience, about 2/3 of the time, our DISC, whatever it is, if it's an ID, I know there's a few DCs that said they were on, there's some SCs, whatever you are will resonate to a certain degree, and you'll easily communicate with the other people there. But ultimately is what this says about DISC is that if you're an I, you're energized by influencing and interacting with people. And just from the dialogue and the conversation, most people can see that. But more importantly is you have a particular body language and tone and words that you use that's comfortable. That's the English, French, Japanese, or Chinese that you speak. But it doesn't resonate with everybody else, but it tells me nothing about what you want at the end of the day. How do you live your life? What's meaningful to you? What gives you purpose? How do you prefer to approach that? And Gary, you and I, although we share the D style, but I was a DC, you're an ID. So we both do things in a fairly direct way. We jump into solving problems, but our approach to how we solve problems and what we want to get out of the solution is really different. So yes. I was hired to solve problems. I'm good at solving problems, but I didn't feel fulfilled at the end of the day. It wasn't the problem I wanted to solve.
Yeah, there you are.
Yeah. And so and we'll come back to yours, because I thought this was fascinating. When we talked on Monday and chatted about this blew me away where you felt. But for those of you who are familiar with DISC and also know me, one of the things is my what is challenge. So that fits in really well with high Ds and somewhat with Cs. Here's the problem, with that is that when you challenge something, when you're willing to be a disruptor, when you're willing to not necessarily comply by the environment or push the envelope or break the rules, not illegally, but just push the envelope. Cs, that's basically contrary. That's of what a high C is, because Cs are energized by complying with the rules set by other people. So how does challenge fit with a high C? Most people would identify as people with a C as not challengers. They just want to dig into the details. They want to dive in. They want to clarify. They want to simplify. Guess what's the lowest on my why? Gets the lowest what I get fulfilled with, what I enjoy doing at the end of the day. That's why I left dentistry. It was too micro. It was too detailed. I was good at it. but there was only so many ways that I can break the rules, that I can break out, that I could disrupt the system. I loved the better way. I was computerized 40 years ago, my office. I was using intraoral cameras in 1991. We were one of the first 100 installations in the country to find a better way to deliver dentistry. But you know what? I wasn't following the rules, and it is how I communicate, how people saw me, what they thought I should be good at, wasn't what fulfilled me. So it was pretty easy for me to walk away. But what was unique is, and I know this now, I never changed my purpose. People say, well, how did you make a switch from dentistry to futurist to business consultant to author and not have anything to do with dentistry? I don't have any dental clients because my purpose never changed. What I wanted out of life never changed.
Mm-hmm.
So if we go back to where you were, so I found this fascinating. I thought this was unbelievable. So when you look
at Ira, this is a great answer to Bill's question. Bill's comment said, Gary and Dan both want to motivate others. They both would like to be in control of the conversation. I'd say that's true. And they both would like others to do things their way. All very true, but we're going to go about it completely different. So now take it away.
Yeah. So when we look at this, it's incredible because you covered 6 out of the 9 whys. I thought that was you don't overlap at all. I know you two pretty well, and I've worked with Dan a little bit more than Gary over the last year. But what at the end of the day of what you want out of your roles, what you want to achieve, you both want to help. What's it, 100 million people?
A billion.
Yeah, 100 million people discover their WHYos. You're getting there in a very, very different way. And even Monday, I go back to our conversation Monday, I laid out of how all these discs relate to one another and how every why has 4 different ways to communicate that, to articulate that. And Gary comes up and shows me a graph, and he says, we got to simplify this. We got to simplify. And he's right. I can find the better way and I can do all those things, but I got to simplify it. But this was fascinating. And I think to understand for everybody who's coaching, whether it's on personal development or whether you're a recruiter or in staffing or you're helping companies grow, organizational development in your training, is at the end of the day, this human being, and people are struggling to figure out how do they thrive, how do they flourish, how do they grow in today's extraordinary, never normal times. And using DISC and Myers-Briggs and all these other tools and just coaching on itself isn't going to be enough until you help people figure out what their WHYos is.
Yes, thank you. That's exactly how I feel. And Bill, I like what you said there. So Bill says, yeah, what Dan read was Gary and Dan both want to motivate others. They would like to be in control of the conversation, and they both would like to like others to do things their way. That's how we do it, but why we do it is so different. Dan does it in order to contribute, make a difference, add value, have an impact in people's lives. I do it in order to help people find a better way to move forward. And then it's just a difference in perspective. What if you just looked at our DISC, you would think that we would be very similar, but we're not very similar in the way in pretty much any parts of our lives. I don't think we're very similar, other than we both like golf to a certain degree sometimes. But so I think what you showed us, Ira, was, so for everybody that's listening, Ira took each why and then broke them down. So if you saw the list of not,
yeah, I'm gonna put this up here just a second.
Okay, good.
Oh, perfect.
There it goes. So here was a slide, and basically, if we took the kind of the WHYos is to help others find a better way to challenge the status quo. But how each style. Now I'm a DC, so my preferred way to communicate that was to challenge the status quo head on, pioneer better ways to others' benefit. Or my C might have some influence there to discover better, more efficient, compliant ways of affecting change. That sort of fits there. And again, this is just out of my words. This is just my style. So everybody's going to have to put it into theirs. But I'm looking at finding a better way, the how. I'm looking at that better way. How am I going to communicate that to other people? And what type of, how do other people see me do that? And what they see me as a disruptor, as a challenger, as someone who's direct, as Bill said, it's someone who's direct. I prefer to tell people what to do. But here's the problem, is nearly 70% of the population are I's and S's. They don't want to be told what to do. They want to be influenced. They want to do it they don't get the urgency that I have, the impatience that I have. They're willing to change, but they want to do things at a more steadier pace. S's want to make sure in a better way is that everyone is heard, understood, and supportive of that. As a D, I go, I don't have time for that crap. Let's just get it done and we'll figure it out later. But 40% of the populations are S's. I need to learn I need to communicate the message to me and articulate it. But in order to be effective in how I approach implementing and executing my YOS, I need to learn how to communicate that to the rest of the population. A D is only 18% of the population. A C is only 14% of the population. That's 1/3 of the population is my communication style. 1/3 of the people appreciates my body language, the tone that I use, and the manner in which I speak, unless I learn to be bilingual or multilingual and speak the other DISC languages. So if I'm okay knowing my DISC and my YOS and living in a somewhat isolated world, then that's good. If what you're doing this is just personal development. But if you're looking at this to become a better leader, to become a better team player, to become a better spouse, a better partner, whatever it is, if you're looking to be able to have others be part of your life when it comes to your YOS, to help you make sure that you do grow and flourish and you can live that, you need to learn how to communicate it through a different language. And that's what we're working on. This is a work in progress. So basically is for 9 Ys, there's 4 different languages every Y can communicate, which means that there's really 36 different languages that there's really 36 different ways Y can be communicated. And if we double that, if we say you could be a high D or a low D because we prefer different things, that's 72 different ways that we can communicate the YOS. And that's what I'm working on with Gary and Dan to help. What's the roadmap from that? How do we help others understand what our YOS is?
And I think we'd love to have feedback from, I know there's some people just looking in the comments that are also very involved with DISC, coach using DISC, coach using YOS. They have both. So I'd love some perspective or questions. Are there any questions? Just post them in the comment.
That's right. And I want to share this comment, Gary. John Saunders says, using these 2 assessments together at depth and breadth. So helpful for coaching and relationships in general. And it just so happens his how is mastery. So he's talking about depth and breadth. And you probably could have expected that, right, Gary?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. And Annette Hohenberger, hey, Annette, we were just on the phone about 30 minutes ago. So she says, do you have the PowerPoint created yet for the 9 Ys and how it applies to each DISC style? I bet that's going to you, Ira.
Yeah, and it's a work in progress. We are absolutely working on it. I'm actually, and a shout out, I don't know if she's on the call today, but to Judy Suter. Judy Suter has been my colleague, my friend, my mentor. That's where I learned much of what I know about DISC. For the last, I think we met in January of 1996, somewhere around there. She really is the expert on DISC, and she's been helping me define these. So we are working on that, and we're going to be looking at some programs because, as I said, for those who've known me for a number of years working with other assessments, there's a lot of times, about 1/3 of the time, that DISC conflicts with another assessment. And people say, well, which one's right? They're both right because they measure different things in different ways. And as we've talked about before, DISC is just how we're going to communicate our how of the YOS. It just is how we're going to articulate finding a better way or making sense. How we articulate that to other people is going to come from the why. So we're going to be working on that, Annette, and really appreciate it.
And Judy Suter is here. She said hello. So just so you know, and we just thanked her for making you so smart, Ira. Any comments or questions from anyone? Let's put them in the chat. I want to see if anybody had a question from earlier. And then I want to get a comment on how do we funnel down. Michael Dill says, how do we funnel down to find out how our why correlation with the DISC, as your example shows, is coming to us in time? And I guess that's a question for Ira. And as we talked about, Ira's working with us, and I know Ira's working on this hard.
Yeah, hopefully within the next few weeks, we'll be putting out dribs and drabs of it as we did, but similar to the model that's displayed. I'm going to take that down right now so you can see us. But yeah, basically how we communicate that. We'll be putting out there. We'll be looking for other input from other experiences. One of the best ways that I learned DISC and every other assessment, especially how they integrate, is by listening and observing to other people, but also by other people sharing the story. Is like, here, I'm an SC, and this is how I communicated my YOS. We're going to learn from the examples that you share, because as good as we try to be, it's tough to be that chameleon to step in everybody else's shoes. So we appreciate your input as well. But over the next few weeks, stay tuned, and we'll be putting together both a PowerPoint, some cheat sheets, and hopefully a workshop or even a certification program around that. Not around certifying for people for why, but how do you integrate the combination of DISC and YOS?
So if you look at Laura's comments, Dan, maybe just read that. And
I'll read that out for you guys. Laura says, great insights. I find using Y and DISC together extremely helpful in helping people find their professional niche, or adapt it to focus on where to add value and be valued. Her DISC is DI, her Y is simplify, better way, and her what is right way. So that's real good correlation there. You'd probably say, right, Ira?
Yep. Well, yeah, it's incredible. I mean, understanding that, but for a DI doing things the right way isn't necessarily how, when you read DISC, if you read a DISC profile, I'll guarantee you there's not going to be any DISC profile that says DISC is motivated by doing things the right way. They just get things done, and they ask for permission later.
That's more of a challenge. That's more of a challenge. You would expect that from a challenge person, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, a DI in a right way doesn't mean that DIs don't want to do it the right way. Mm-hmm. But in everybody else's line of sight, they don't see it that way. Right. Because Ds are going to challenge, and Is are looking at the experience and getting everybody on board and interacting with other people. And sometimes Ds just go for it. They can do it alone.
Excellent. So simplify, better way, right way. So why she does it is to make things simple, direct, to the point. Don't give her the fluff. Don't beat around the bush. Don't give me all the extra stuff. So people with the why of simplify can be very direct and very abrupt and easily misread.
Oh, absolutely. Perfect. Yep.
And so how she does it is by looking for better ways. And again, on the better way side of things, we can be kind of direct, to the point. Let's quit messing around here. Let's just get this sucker going. And same thing with right way. So they can definitely be very direct.
Right. If you're trying to change your own behavior, then it doesn't matter what your what your DISC is, you're going to communicate it. But if you're trying to engage, inspire, motivate, collaborate, get other people on board, then you're going to have to communicate it in a way that they hear and that resonates with them and they're comfortable with. So doing it the right way, just getting it done, just follow me, trust me, get there, isn't going to work for somebody who says, but we've been doing this for the last 10 years this way and we're pretty comfortable with it. I understand why we need to change, but we need to think about it first.
Yeah.
Or this is just way too complicated for me. We need to simplify it first. Mm-hmm. Or it doesn't make sense to me. Or we just met. I don't trust you.
Yeah.
Okay. We need to speak in their language. And that won't happen unless you're speaking it in their DISC language, because it's no different than me if we did this whole presentation in Chinese to people that only speak English, it's going to sound like Chinese to them. And they have no idea what they said. They may like our mannerisms and our enthusiasm, but the rest is irrelevant.
Gary, you've been doing something. That's a really good point, Ira, and you brought about talking in people's language. Let's use Ira as an example, Gary. There is a way to talk to Ira using his WHYos, and if you know his DISC, that's important too. But there's something, the new thing that I've heard you do in presentations, talking about you're looking for people who are looking for. Could you do that with Ira, just for the audience to hear?
Yeah. So the person that's really going to resonate with Ira's ideal client. So this would be the same thing for every one of you. When you think about who would be your ideal client to work with. So if you were to write this down, if you have a piece of paper and pencil or pen with you, write this down. I'm looking for someone who's looking for. So just write that down. I'm looking for someone who's looking for. And Ira's WHYos is why is contribute, his how is better way, and his what is challenge. So Ira's looking for someone who's looking to have a bigger impact, contribute. Ira's looking for someone who's looking for a better way. And Ira's looking for someone who's looking for an outside the box solution, not typical. And if he finds that person, they're going to love him. They're going to love him. Doesn't mean they have to have Ira's WHYos. It just means they have to believe what he believes. That he believes in having a bigger impact. He believes in finding a better way, and he believes in challenging the status quo. If they believe that, boy, it's going to be awesome. If they don't believe that, they could still work together, but they're not going to have a great relationship. It's not going to be the right fit.
And for Gary and Dan, I know the three of us can go on forever. We're just scratching the surface. But we are just about out of time, and I want to respect everybody's time here. So I know you guys have an offer, and then we have an offer as well for people that want to learn more and get more involved. So I'm going to turn it back to Dan or Gary for that, and then we'll wrap it up.
Right. And I think we're going to put that in the comments. So if you're interested in learning more about WHYos, if you're a coach and you want to learn more about how to become certified, there's a link right there, whyinstitute.com/cert-special-event. Go there. There's a place for you to learn more about certification. Or if you want to just set an appointment and learn more, we can have a conversation about it. It's hard to do it justice in 1 hour, but there's a lot of you that were on the call that are certified. So if you want to give your friends a little bit of what you've gotten out of it, and you've done a good job of it, that's fantastic. And I know, Ira, you've got something else going on that we'd like to make people aware of. How can they get a hold of you if they want to learn more about using WHYos and DISC?
Yeah. So scrolling across on the bottom is the adaptabilitytoolkit.com. That's my site. On that is I also have the AQ, the adaptability quotient. But there's access to the why. You can learn more about the why. You can purchase the why there. For anyone who's interested in either for anybody who's familiar with DISC, but you'd like to learn a little bit more about why, I've got a special offer. Just reach out to me. I wasn't able to get the coupon and everything up there, but we're going to be offering it at a small discount. If you haven't completed the DISC yet or haven't done it in a while and you want to do them both together, reach out to me. We have a program there, and then also link up with me on LinkedIn or just send me a message. And as we move forward along over the next few weeks, we'll make sure that you get information about the any of the cheat sheets or the charts or any programs that we have coming up about how to learn to use the Y with the WHYos. So
the DISC with WHYos,
yeah, DISC with WHYos. Yep.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Ira. Thank you so much, Gary. It's been a pleasure to have you guys on. It's a classic peanut butter and jelly. I know a couple of people commented, how could it be better? But you guys have done a great job today. It's been fun. Thank you, everybody that tuned in. Thank you for all the questions, and we look forward to hearing from you. I know Ira put his contact information. I know Nikki put her contact information. So you can get a hold of us through our LinkedIn, and we look forward to working with you.
And I'm going to make one final comment, free giveaway. And I don't know if you knew this, Gary, but in the next month, I've co-authored a book. It's called The Change. It's the fastest growing personal development series in the world. I am the co-author, the lead. I think I've got the lead chapter in it. And it's all about the why. It was about my life, my change, how I moved from dentistry to what I'm doing now. But I basically embedded the why in there. And so you can learn how it gets applied. The book's going to be free download. So you can go to irawolf.com/the-change-book. It's on the bottom there. For anybody that's interested, you also just go to my website, irawolf.com, and you'll be able to download it. Dan, thank you very much for helping moderate and the introduction. Gary, it's always a pleasure being with you. And I think this is just the very beginning. We're just in the foreword. We haven't even written the first chapter of what this is going to be. And we'll look forward to working with you again soon.
Thanks, Ira.
Thanks everybody for joining us. Thank you.